Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this 8 p.m. event looking at data competency, and particularly looking at where we should be focusing our resources and energy, whether better skills or better systems. So we'll be joined today by three colleagues. So we've got Dan joining us, founder of Continuum, with a 30-year background in data and the world of data. We've got Lewis joining us from University of Warwick. One of the researchers, particularly looking at enablers and blockers when it comes to data in business. And we've got Martin joining us from Projecting Success, both on the consultancy side, but then also on the upskilling colleagues to be able to implement the project data analytics. So thanks for joining us. It's going to be an interactive session. We'll be having about 10 minutes each per guest to talk us through their point of view, and then we'll have an open forum for some Q&A. Just a few bits of housekeeping for you. So you'll be on mute throughout the session, so we won't be able to see you or hear you. But if you do have any questions, please do post it on the questions tab on the right-hand side. You can do this throughout the session, and we'll pick up on it when we move on to the Q&A. The session's also recorded, so if you have any colleagues who aren't able to join, we will post a link to it on the 8 p.m. website afterwards. Just to kick us off, we've got a few questions on the slide in front of you. Rob, if you just head to the next slide for us. Perfect. So this is just a gauge of the audience and where you're from, which industry. Our kind of speakers are from a variety of sectors as well, so it'll be great to see who's joining us. So if you just fill that in on the Slido poll, you'll be able to scan the QR code as well to access that if you need to. So wait for that and start climbing as people fill in. We'd appreciate that. And there'll be a few more questions later on as well. But what we particularly want to focus on today is data and what data competency looks like for a business. We all know that data is becoming a buzzword and a hot topic in a lot of businesses. My background with construction, it's becoming more and more relevant to our day-to-day roles. And today we want to look at, as a business, where should we be focusing? Should we be investing in upskilling our teams, or should we be investing in more kind of capable systems for our business? So what we'll do, we'll head straight in, and it's good to see a real mix of people on the call as well. Please do continue filling that in. It's really useful for us and for the speakers to see. So I'll hand over straight to Dan to talk us through his kind of thinking. And Dan, we pose the question to you when it comes to data competency. Should we be focusing on better skills or better systems?
Okay, well, thanks, Marius, and thanks everyone at 8 p.m. and all of the volunteers who make this happen. So yes, thanks very much for having me. So my background is, I started on the tools as a data coder, writing millions of miles of SQL. Then moved into consultancy and now resell tools. So obviously with my consultancy background, it depends on both is the answer to better skills or better systems. One thing that I've been doing is I've gone through quite a number of the APM events that are on YouTube. What a great resource, plus very realistic. Sometimes you have a look at data events and it's all about shiny new tools, but particularly Luis's colleague Naomi, there was a lot of real world stuff there about, okay, so all the tools are there, why doesn't more happen? And about those sorts of personal blockers in terms of people's propensity to change and to advocate change and to advocate better data, because that has consequences. So that's really what I'm going to be focusing more on today, to say, look, the tools are there now, right? So I've never, in all of this time, I've never known a better environment for tools, easy to use, no code. So why isn't there more of that? And that's really my kind of point, where I'm coming from a commercial angle, working with lots of clients, 70 odd clients, but each time it's been hard to get adoption and change, and there's probably hundreds of people that we've spoken to that we haven't ended up working with. So really sort of talking about those pieces. So again, first of all, great to have a project brief. So thanks. I'm sure many people here would really love to have a clear project brief. And I guess what I'm going to talk about is better skills or better systems. Well, better skills help you get better data, which help you get use from better systems. Having good systems with bad data is worse than having your existing systems with the same bad data, because it takes all the bandwidth of people in the organization. But let's go. And I guess that 80% piece, the automate the routine, leave the unusual to people. I'm a big advocate of Richard Koch's work, the 80-20 principle, in the 80% of what's part of daily business life can be automated. The hard 20% is best left until you know more about it once you've automated the easy stuff. So next slide, please, Rob. So this is this is the first time I've used this. I read through it again, and it's actually just a whinge slide. So hopefully people will have a look through this and resonate with some of these points. And I should point out that my background is, so I was looking at the verticals that people work in. We mostly work in a corporate technical setting. So if you're the project manager on a bridge, I don't really have a lot to help you with regards to getting a bridge built, but we can help in terms of the head office stuff and also freeing up people's time from the less added value time that they spend, because there's this whole feel that unless you automate 100%, you shouldn't automate anything, whereas I would turn that around and say you should automate the bits you can now, rather than endlessly wringing your hands about how to do the 100%. And great to see Louise and Martin on the call. Both of those advocate the data-driven approach, which is exactly what we're about and our clients are about. And the whole point being is that people just need better data tools to unblock data and to free up data for better decision making by sponsors and stakeholders within the organization. And these are a lot of the blockers that we see. Things like reward headcount. From an internal point of view, the bigger your team, the bigger the chair you've got in the boardroom, so therefore why on earth would you become more efficient? And this speaks to a lot of the points in previous events where not having data savvy decision makers on the board means that people get a free ride when they say they need more people, instead of actually saying no, do more with what you've got by just using better tools. And that would then free up the project office and project managers to make more meaningful change, not just mandatory projects with huge requirements documents before the data has really been bottomed out to find out whether it's actually going to work or not. And that's really the other piece. There's needs to be a culture of experimentation in organizations. Okay, next slide, please. So we use Alteryx. That's our weapon of choice for the data munging, inputting, cleansing, joining, transforming. But this is that kind of the classic left to right data paradigm. So you've got data locked up in all sorts of sources as a corporate. As companies grow and expand and acquire, they're getting more and more data sources all the time. And a lot of data is then locked up because the one set of data just doesn't exist. Data warehouses are just not deliverable for real organizations, and they're not maintainable with a good return on investment. So a lot of the time, do you really need a data warehouse, or do you just need better tools? And in this case, we use Alteryx just because that allows us to get to APIs, PDFs, Excel, whatever line of business systems you've got, and also Power BI, Tableau, Click, whatever you want to use as your presentation layer. But then it also allows you to connect to APIs of non-Microsoft Google stack, so, or AWS stack, so you can get to things like Google Maps for tidying up your address data, for instance, because that's the key point, is to have a repeatable process whereby you can actually get better data. And then we do things like Data Robot and TangentWorks. So that's automated machine learning, which means that you don't have people writing Python that's difficult to support, expensive to write. And when people leave, this is a common thread that Martin made in a previous conversation. You hire 10 people to do Power BI dashboards. When they leave, what's the lasting value? Because what they've used is a dashboard as a lens to get data to work, whereas you should actually just get the data right further upstream, further to the left. And that's what things like RPA forward. So robotic process automation. And you could probably fit Power Automate in there for the easier use cases. So that's the lens that we're going to use. No code, right? We don't want coders. We want people who know the business, who understand the data and understand what the requirements are, and then can use no code tools to express that. Next slide, please, Rob. And what we're going to do is I'll just go through a few of the different use cases that are common within organizations, cross segments, and just to say that it's all the same, really. All that changes is that the sources of the data change and the required outcome for the business changes, which hopefully will be driving profit or better utilization or better efficiency. And if we look at that on this example, you would have, hopefully you'd have a proper system like Primavera for your budgets, but many budgets are held in Excel spreadsheets. And so you'll see that you've got budgets, then you've got your project plan and completion, relative completion rates, then you've got your actuals, so how much money are you spending. They could be held in a variety of different places. It could be SAP for a classic ERP, or in a more modern stack, it could be something like Xero, which is a cloud-based accounting platform, and then probably project time is being recorded somewhere else, either in something like Harvest, which is another SaaS platform, or maybe within an ERP platform, but none of that data is all in the same place. And that's where we use Alteryx, is that lens to repeatedly pull it together without writing code. But that, again, that could be Power Query, for instance, for simpler use cases. It's just we find that we need to have a provable result. And then, again, you plug in good old Excel for your mappings to actually then have real-time actuals versus budgets and where you are with your projects. Again, what we see a lot is project managers do this individually. There's no commonality enforced across the project office. So some people are better at this than others, but if you did a classic time and motion study, the amount of time that project managers use munging stuff together in Excel for their weekly reports or monthly reports or risk review is just unbelievable, when there's so much commonality that could be with some templated items that then allows you to apply that to each of your projects and across a project board that then gives you some benchmarking and some next steps to do continuous improvement. Just keep getting better. Don't try and fix, because you can't fix completely anything anymore. Next slide, please. So another one, and I've been really glad to see that we do machine learning and AI and prescriptive analytics, etc., which is that further along the data maturity. But the number one excuse we hear from clients is, well, we don't know what's happening now, so why would we believe what might be happening next week or the week after? And the only way that's going to happen is by having a virtuous circle of improving your data while still having usable data sets for now. So you get some return on investment instead of embarking on the fool's errand of trying to get 100% good data in your systems before you start doing any data analytics. It's only by having usable data from your existing data that you have a way of progressing to improve your quality, but get some return on investment now rather than getting blown off wind by other priorities. Next slide, please. Next. So one of the classics that we see organizations not really appreciating the risks that they're running is new system implementations, migrations, and transfers. And this is typically done side of the desk. It's a typical waterfall project whereby you only get to the real data problems at the end, and then that completely derails the whole project. People finally get backfilled and put on the project. Whereas if you have a repeatable way of getting your old systems into a new shape to get it into the new system, then you're halfway there already and you're finding your data problems in your existing system. Next. And in the same way as a motor and a dynamo just run in opposite directions, they're the same physics. In this case, you just turn around that input from the new system, and then suddenly you have a rerunnable reconciliation that allows you to show, when you're trying to put a new system in, where's the problem? Is the problem in the old system or the new system? And that typically ties up so much time with project managers and the business having to do manual data recs when you can automate that. Next. And then regulatory reporting, I think, is becoming more and more part of our reality, and that could be internal regulatory reporting with internal audit functions. How do you know it's right? And again, this is, you'll see that accounts for review at the top there. This is about financial reporting, but it could be any risk reporting or whatever. That accounts for review, you need to go and fix those, right? You need to go and fix the data in the source system. And then you can then move on to the next stage. So next. So again, here you can then take things like XML files and reconcile year on year. Again, this is something that's very difficult, but this sort of reporting is growing and growing, and it's a huge drain on real businesses. This is internal spend, not doing anything for the customers. Next. And then at the end, one's able to then automate where the data goes, which bucket does it go into if you're trying to fix reports. So, hopefully, I've just shown in that sort of brief intro that it's all about having good tools that you can apply to the people you already have in organizations who are doing all of this in Excel, maybe with some macros, maybe there's some SQL going on. But really, those people are the key people. If you try and go and hire 10 developers, A, they aren't there to be had, and B, they won't know anything about your business. So you're going to have to spend a long time training them in understanding the reality of your business, when if you give better tools to provide better data that then provide better systems, then use your people internally. And I'm really glad to see there's a focus on that with the other speakers. So with that, thanks very much. And obviously next, I think there's a next slide, is there? Yeah, so please feel free to reach out or just listen to the rest of what people are talking about. I think it's all the human is the problem now. The tools are there. It's just propensity to change. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Dan. And I like the 80-20 rule about automating the standard and keeping the exceptions to people. Thank you very much for that. It was really useful. And then we've got Lewis next to talk us through his perspective and a bit of a kind of researcher's angle on the question of data competency and skills or systems. So Lewis, over to you.
Thank you, Marius. Thank you a lot for having me in this event. A big thanks to all the organizers. So as you heard, my name is Luis Lattuf, and I will try to briefly present some of the research I am doing in the area of data analytics in the context of project management. Next slide, please. So first, a little bit of information. I have a background in civil engineering and construction management, and currently I am doing a PhD at the WMG in the area of project data analytics. As part of WMG, I am also a researcher of WMG's Project Praxis Group, which we are helping organizations turn the best of project research into the best of project practice. So we have a lot of research going on, from eliminating modern slavery to fixing the complex delivery of decommissioning nuclear projects, for example. But of course, one of our core areas of research is in the area of project data analytics, where we are having cutting-edge research to use data to improve data-driven decisions. So just a few examples of our research. We have project data analytics, a state-of-the-art in science, which are the barriers and enablers for the adoption of PDA. We are developing a project data maturity model. We are also looking into which are the best machine learning algorithms for project prediction, and also how to use project data analytics in the UK civil service. Next slide, please. So now I would like to briefly take you to one of our most recent investigations, which is called Revolution, Barriers and Enablers for Project Data Analytics in Infrastructure Projects. It was made by Professor Naomi Brooks, myself, and it was sponsored by the Oakland Group. A big thanks to them for this. And this report will be available at the end of this month. So if you are interested, please get in touch. Next slide. So really quickly, why should we adopt project data analytics? Well, as we all of us are aware, infrastructure projects are notorious for their perceived poor delivery, and at the root of this poor delivery lies poor decision making. But it is funny that despite having more data than ever before on our projects, and a lot of tools available, there is little evidence to suggest any improvement in the decision-making processes. Some studies suggest that if we used PDA better, we would have been savings, for example, of £23 billion in the UK infrastructure sector. But yet, even despite these benefits, PDA is not well understood and adopted by some organizations. That is why we came with this research to understand the barriers and enablers for PDA adoption. So really briefly, project data analytics for us at its simplest is the use of past and current project data to enable the effective decision on project delivery. This includes descriptive analytics, which is presenting data in the most effective format, and dashboards is the best example of this. And also it includes predictive analytics, so it's using data to predict future performance. Next slide, please. So what's the state of the art of project data analytics? I will not get much into detail in this because I would like you to point you to please read our APM's Pathfinder report, which is called Project Data Analytics, the State of the Art and Science. You will find it on the APM webpage. But really briefly, we found that descriptive PDA, especially in terms of dashboards, are widely used by organizations, but this is not translating in benefits and in improvement in decision making that we would all expect. And on the other hand, predictive data analytics is only being pursued by really small example of infrastructure providers. We also classified or make an assessment of descriptive analytics and predictive analytics across projects in one organization and also across projects in many organizations. So this is the matrix that you are seeing here. So it's a really good report that I would suggest you to please find. Next slide, please. So in order to understand the barriers and enablers, as I said, we adopt an investigation method that is called a Delphi Study, which at its simplest, it's just a way of discussion with a panel of experts, which each of our interactions inform the next stage. So for example, we started with a pre-questionnaire for all our experts. Then we had a Delphi event for all the discussions. Then we review all the findings, send them again to all the experts, and at the end produce our findings and outputs. Next slide, please. So in terms of our Delphi participants, it was really important for us to have a wide range of stakeholder groups. So for example, we had delivery or data consultancies, professional membership organizations, infrastructure client of transport, energy, water, global construction and professional services organizations, UK construction and engineering organization, and also the UK civil service. But as well, we needed a wide view of the different roles of project delivery. So we had senior leaders or CEOs, assurance people, cross-organizational data analytics experts, delivery people, PMOs, and project controls. Next slide. So these are the organizations that participated with us in this study. So as you may see, these are some of the most important organizations in the infrastructure sector of the UK, and some of them have international presence as well. Next slide. Speaking a bit of our findings, we collated all the discussions of the experts, and we came with these 6 key implementation issues themes, which include abandoning data environment, motivating to adopt the unknown, unprecedented change management, PDA-friendly culture, and the 2 that are related to this webinar, universal data literacy, and project data analytic standards and systems. After this, we also asked the experts to rank which were the most impactful barriers or enablers they were finding, and we came to these 5 core high-ranked issues, which are good data quality, available of example cases, recognizing the scale of the change task, eliminating the fear of data, and the need for awareness, not analyst, which I will go a bit further into it. Next slide. So our findings look a bit of this. As I said, because of time, I will not get into detail of all of this. But our 6 main themes were also divided into sub-themes. which could act as a barrier, as an enabler, or as both. Barriers and enablers for the adoption of project data analytics. So I will just concentrate on the PDA Standards and Systems and Universal Data Literacy. Next slide, please. In terms of PDA Standards and Systems, we subdivided in system proliferation, which is a barrier, organizational standards, which act as a barrier and an enabler, and doing the basics, which is an enabler. For example, in the system proliferation, it depended on the organizational data maturity. So some of the organization find it as a difficult task or as a big barrier, but most of them didn't find it as a big issue for implementing project data analytics, which was a really surprise for us. Actually, in terms of standards, it's important to bring a standardization of data management systems and processes so that consistency in data collection and management could be achieved. Next slide. So one of the most important features of our report are the direct quotations of all the experts that we had. So all of the insights and findings we made are backed up with evidence of all of our experts. So for instance, a senior project control executive of the International Construction and Professional Service Organization says the underlying issue isn't that there are many systems, it's that they all may be coded differently. So all of these quotations gave us all the insights we needed to have our findings of the report. Next slide. In terms of universal data literacy, we subdivided in awareness, not analysis, which is an enabler. Well, actually, one of the most important features of universal data literacy is that everything is an enabler. So that's a pretty good insight on the question of this webinar, better systems or better skills. So as I was saying, awareness, not analysis, understanding the text capabilities, basic project management knowledge, and tailored competency frameworks. Participants were very clear that they did not feel the need to have cohorts of data analysts join the ranks of project practitioners. What they require is instead to develop a data literacy across all members of the organization related to what is data and how can it be used. And this was one of the highest ranked areas of all the study. So it was a pretty important area. Next slide. So as you can see, and as I said, everything is evidence with all the quotations of our experts. So the CEO of Delivery and Data Consultancy told us this isn't about training all the people in projects and trying to make them data scientists. This is about people with a good appreciation of how PDA fits together with their daily job. The same opinion of the CEO of a project professional membership organization. It's a qualifier for me. It's not that we need to set up a course and go and have another 10,000 people with a particular function joining the project profession. Instead, every project professional needs to improve their data literacy. Next slide. Finally, one of our most important implications of this story was that participants did not rank issues surrounding the standards and systems of PDA adoption as of the highest importance, as I mentioned before. Instead, they prioritize aspects of the fundamental environment for PDA. Their responses exemplified that adopting PDA successfully goes way beyond the simple acquisition of a new piece of analytics software or a new dashboard. So I think this gives the best answer to the question of this webinar, better skills or better systems. And it's an answer that is based on research and a lot of evidence. As well, the thematic issues are linked together in a network of complex interrelationships. So as Dan was mentioning, we need to manage all these teams simultaneously and make sure that we have virtuous circles, not vicious ones. So there is no silver bullet. All aspects of implementing project data analytics need to be considered holistically and simultaneously. So in order to do this, organizations need to recognize that their journey to adopt PDA needs to reflect how mature they are across the thematic areas. Next slide. Some of the actions that we are stating in our report. So organizations need to assess their PDA organizational readiness through maturity models. As I mentioned, we are developing right now one of our own. And also organizations need to pay particular attention to the top 5 implementation issues that I mentioned. So for example, in the creating awareness, not analysis, they saw a universal need for all project practitioners to be data literate. So this is to have an understanding of the role of data and how it may contribute to decision making, and also for them to be a bit of tech savvy, so to understand what the tech can and cannot do. As Dan says, there's a lot of buzzwords out there, machine learning, artificial intelligence, but actually we need to take a step back, do the basics right, get good data quality, and then we can talk about machine learning, and artificial intelligence is another story at the moment. Next slide. So this is all. Thank you a lot for your attention. If you want to collaborate, or if you want, you have any doubts, please feel free to contact me. Those are my contact details. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Lewis. And it's interesting to see a kind of a recurring theme of culture shift being a key challenge. So yeah, they're really interesting. Thank you. So Martin, we pose the same question to you when it comes to data competency. What's your take on our focus on data skills or systems?
So in terms of this presentation, so I'm just going to walk you through a few slides. I'd like to pick up one of Lewis's points actually about awareness, not analysts. I think that's a bit loose in terms of the language of it. It means if you sheep dip everybody in a 1-hour course, then everyone's aware of it. And I don't think that's the intention. I think the intention is to upskill project professionals so they can start to leverage this new sort of toolbox of skills and start to get going on it. So I think I'd recommend, Lewis, that you just tighten that language a little bit. So a big thanks to Marius today for putting this on, and to the APM for hosting us as well. I do appreciate it. So Rob, if you could give me the next slide, please. So in terms of a bit of background, so I'm a project manager by sort of training background. I've run a billion-dollar job. And I started on this journey into project data analytics around 2014, associated with lessons learned at the time. And I really ramped up the investment in this in 2017. We found that, you know, we spoke to some clients and they weren't interested in this. They weren't interested because it was all space age, you know, it's never going to happen in my lifetime type stuff. So what we tried to do was to build awareness. So we started the project data analytics community, and we sort of founded the term project data analytics back in December 2017. That's now grown to about 8,000 people. Well, that's not enough. We've found that people need some practical experience of being able to do this, and sort of inspire people and to ignite their professional imagination. So we've now had 10 hackathons. We've got the 11th one coming up 7th and 8th of October if you're interested. And that's giving people some practical experience of actually doing this, understand the art of the possible, and see what can be done in 2 days. So what we also did was to get the Project Data Analytics Task Force underway, which has brought together a load of organisations. So UCL, Oxford University has been part of it, BAE Systems, Petrofac, Government Kelp, and loads of organisations. And we're trying to shape this destiny, trying to make things happen, and to bring a sort of consensus together about what sort of needs to happen next. We've also got the role of the data steward for the Construction Data Trust, and that enables us to start to pull data to drive this forward. So in terms of project data analytics, I'm proud to say we've been the driving force trying to get this thing going. It's been really hard over the last 5 years or so, but I think we're at a tipping point now, and this thing's really going to take off. And you'll find that a lot of project delivery roles will be transformed as a consequence. The next slide, please. So those challenges which Lewis has brought out, I've got a different perspective on it. So I do work with quite a lot of organisations, probably about 60 organisations, and we see this day in, day out about the challenges and implementation. So we've run some Mentimeter sessions through the project data analytics community, and this is one, right? So this was saying, have you got board level commitment? And the answer is mainly, yeah, we've got some. It's a bit superficial, you know. It's not really on the board agenda on a regular basis. They've got some financial commitment, but that tends to be more in the consulting end of the businesses rather than the big construction companies. Now, I do think that's changing, right? I've seen change in the last month or two, so I do think it's starting to change. So I think you'll see that profile of that graph start to move across. So I think the first thing we need to do is to shape a board commitment, because if you've got board commitment, you can do something. Now, if you jump in with a massive program, you'll never get the money. It won't fight against other priorities. So you've got to start somewhere. The next slide, please, Rob. So that brings me back to this sort of point about the tactical versus strategic. So what I find at the moment is a lot of organizations are jumping straight into these tactical point solutions, and it tends to be around things like Power BI or a few automation sort of type solutions. Now that gets you going, it gets you on the bus, and it starts to get you to where you need to be. But it's a case of taking a step back and just looking at the overall perspective about where you want to be. If you're moving towards data-driven project delivery, just sticking a sticking plaster and doing these things ad hoc and almost in a random way is not going to get you to where you need to be. So you need to think strategically, act tactically, and I think that's my advice to you. Challenge 3, next slide, please, Rob. Is to think about the problems you're trying to solve as well. So a lot of people just throw tech at this problem, right, and say project data analytics, let's have a bit of this, let's have a bit of that, you know, the old tricks. Sorry, Dan. And you've got to start with the problem in mind, right? And that's what a lot of people don't do at the moment. So they're just creating dashboards, and I see loads of them coming out of the hackathon, and you think, I don't know what to do with it. I can't see the wood for the trees. We're not thinking about the problems we're trying to solve. So we've always got to start off with the problem statements, and we can map those problem statements into these solutions, and we can map the solutions into the data and the data quality. And then we can do a gap analysis about whether the data exists at the moment, whether you've got the contracts in place to get hold of that data, etc. So that's what we need to be doing. And next slide, please. And there's a lot of people saying my data is not good enough, I can't do this, it's never going to be good enough, it's all a bit difficult. Now, that is true, right? It's going to be hard to get this data right, especially risk management data. It's not black and white data. It doesn't come out of a control panel. It's got human biases in it, all sorts of things. But what we can do through machine learning, we can use training data sets to start to drive that data quality up. And we can do that gap analysis between the problem statements and the data you need, so we can start to drive it up. And some organizations are now starting to grip this, and others have just put it in the too difficult box. If it's in the too difficult box, you'll never get to the data volumes you need, so you can start to make a difference. If you start to address this now, you start to build up those data volumes, and that means you can move to the next generation of project delivery. The next slide, please, Rob. And this is a big one, right? So this is a lack of capacity. So I speak to a lot of organizations, and they're stuck in the sort of ground battle. You know, it's the knife fight of project delivery. Day to day, you're just battling through, and you're trying to get your work done, you're trying to get your projects delivered, you're trying to work on your portfolio. And they're lacking capacity. And they're lacking capacity because we're doing stuff like we've done it for the last 40 years. We need to think differently about what we do it. So that's about things like fully automated reporting. So that's end to end. You can use your data pipelines for that, Power BI, you can use all sorts of stuff. You can use Python to start to rip data out of emails. You can do things for free, right? So you don't need to buy expensive tools to do it. You can do a lot of this for free. You can leverage your Microsoft stack. You can use Alteryx. You can do all sorts of stuff. Once you start to do that, we free up capacity, so we can then push people up the value chain, right? If you push people up the value chain, your job becomes more fulfilling. So we need to create that capacity, and we need to think differently about the way we do things. Next slide, please, Rob. So there's a massive problem across the industry at the moment is we lack people, and this is board level all the way down to sort of analysts. And we do need people who can drive these systems and start to contract for this stuff. So if you're procuring with suppliers, you need to be contracting for data. You need to understand about data ownership. And And we need people who can really apply project data analytics. So it's not just about an awareness, it's about being a practitioner. And that's domain expert of project delivery. So you are a sort of project delivery professional, but you've sort of finessed your skill sets in terms of project data analytics. So you've now got some superpowers where you can start to drive this forward. Next slide, please, Rob. So in terms of a tech-only approach, right? So the tech solutions are getting prolific. Every day of the week, there's a new one coming out. There's a new startup, and some of these startups are getting a humongous amount of money. So I've tracked in the last 6 months, there's $100 million gone into project data analytics solutions. And if I track that back to 3 years ago, it's next to nothing. So it is starting to ramp up. So there's some organizations who's getting a lot of money. And they're point solutions, you know, very narrow sort of scope. And on top of that, you know, you've got the platform type approaches like Alteryx, and you've got Microsoft Stacks, you've got ProQ and those sort of things. So tech is not the barrier, right? That's not what's going to stop you doing this. But the problem is, where do you start first? So you've got to think about your priorities. And if you just jump into this and you start to do a bit of, you know, Power BI, you're going to be missing the overall implementation strategy. So is this a tech-driven strategy, just going to buy sort of point solutions, or is this a data-driven strategy? And my recommendation is always think about data sort of driven strategies. If you don't do that, your data is going to be scattered around everywhere. Your supply chain is going to own parts of it, and you can't get your hands on it, etc. It's got to be data driven, because that's where your insights will all come from. You've got to think about what data you're collecting and how much and at what quality, and that's all driven by your domain expertise. You've got to think about the ownership of that data. And what's your rights of use of that data as well. So you've got a contract for this. There's a load of hype associated with it as well. You've got to think through the hype, and to cut through the hype as well and understand, you know, if there's a black box solution, do you trust that training data set that's underpinned that black box solution? And what do we do about joining all of these point solutions together? So you need APIs to make sure it's all joined up, and that's when you get into data engineering and all sorts of stuff. And I think my advice, you know, a fool with a tool is still a fool. You need to know what problems you're trying to solve. Don't just throw tech at the problem. The next slide, please, Rob. So I would recommend to you, blindly applying tech will not work. And I've seen some organizations trying to do this, and it rapidly runs out of steam. So what we've got to do is to bring this domain expertise in, and it starts to shape these priorities, and it shapes our destination. And the thing about projects is they transcend boundaries. So it's not about your organization, it's about your projects. And your projects are with your supply chain, they're with sort of cross-departmental barriers, etc. So you've got to work on it collaboratively. It's not just about one organization. And I think that's really key. I'm seeing that some organizations aren't quite grasping that yet. But I think that will change. I think you'll see things like the data trust will start to break that. Next slide, please. So in terms of projecting success, as I say, we've worked with a lot of organizations on this, and the challenges are very, very real, right? It is stopping organizations from getting progress at the moment. They can't unlock these things. So the first thing we need is some people who really understand this, and that's board level, you know, being sheep dipped in it, down to project practitioners who start to reimagine their job and reimagine with the way we deliver projects. So we need all these people who shape the problem statements, and they shape what data they need and get the data pipelines in place. It must be data driven and tech enabled, not solution driven. And tactical solutions will take us part of the way, but it's a dead end if you don't think about the overall project data analytics strategy, about what you need to do to reinvent the way that you work. Next slide, please, Rob. So in terms of better skills or better systems, I think the starting point is you've got to start with upskilling people, and that's we focused on the community first of all, because nobody understood what it was all about. So the project data analytics community runs events a bit like this one today, where you start to get people understanding this sort of terminology, some of the principles, etc. And then we moved into hackathons, and then we moved into things like the apprenticeship scheme as well. So It's about inspiring people in terms of the art of the possible. It's about developing these strategies and plans, and as a consequence of that, it's working up some roadmaps, and those roadmaps reflect your organisational priorities. So we've then got to train people up in terms of the skills to apply this technology and providing the skills to design their ecosystem. So it's an ecosystem of all these different platforms and data and strategies and policies and anonymization, pseudonymization and GDPR and all those sort of things, right? And I think if we don't start with this upskilling and we just bring in a load of data scientists, data analysts, and they just start to process the data, we start to disconnect between the problem statements and what we're trying to achieve. Those people get bored very, very quickly and they'll leave you. And you've invested a lot of money in these data scientists on board them, and they'll say your data is not good enough to do all the things that you want to do with it. So it's a interconnected problem that we need to solve, and it's about upskilling. It's part of the hackathons. You can then start to understand the art of the possible. You go away inspired, you go and have the confidence where you can apply some of this stuff, and then you get going. In parallel with that, you work on the strategy, you work on the roadmap, and you put some sort of small investments into it, and you get going. So a better system sort of enable this vision, but essentially without a plan, it becomes vendor driven, and I don't think that's where you want to be. The next slide, please, Rob. So what we did back in 2018-19, we saw a dearth of skills, and we saw that as a major obstacle to getting this vision sort of realized. So what we did was we set up an academy, and we linked it back to the government's training program. So there's apprenticeship funding. Basically, every single company out there with a pay bill of more than £3 million gets taxed at 0.5%, and that sits in this training account. And if you don't spend it, you lose it. So a lot of organisations aren't spending it. So it's free training money, so you can draw it down. Apprenticeships aren't for 18-year-olds anymore. It's just a way of upskilling people and driving up UK productivity. So in terms of these dearth of skills, you know, we founded the meetup, the hackathons, the project data analytics sort of academy, and the task force as well. All of that is about upskilling and driving this agenda. So next slide, please. So what we're also doing, so in the next 4 weeks, we're launching this brand new portal, and in this portal, we'll be putting loads of solutions out there. So solutions which have been coming out of the hackathon, we're productionizing them at the moment. We're going to open source them all. And that means we can democratize this, we can give it away and start to drive people, and it's a tide that lifts all the boats. And what we're missing at the moment is the people with the skills to deploy those and to understand where they work, where they don't work, where it fits in with the overall strategy. Next slide, please. So I think for me, it's skills first, unleash those new superpowers, all enabled by the technology. Next slide. So it's a new dawn, right? We're entering a brand new period. We're really going to transform project delivery. Risk management going to change completely. QSs are going to change completely. Things like RFIs and TQs are going to blow that apart. So there's a lot of things which are really going to get transformed, right? This is not pie in the sky stuff. I'm working on some really exciting stuff with some big organizations, some big public sector organizations as well, where we're going to reinvent this stuff. And it's coming down the track very, very quickly. So get ready for it. It's really exciting. And last slide, please, Rob. So that's me. If you want to reach out to me, find me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of stuff about keeping you in the loop with stuff. We've got a meetup tomorrow night with Dave Snowden on complexity. So please get involved. And project data analytics is going to transform project delivery. So get on the bus and get ready for a really, really new, exciting future.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Martin. A really interesting perspective. So I appreciate that. Just conscious of time, we're going to jump straight into some Q&A for all three of the speakers. There are quite a few questions through from attendees, so thank you for that. So we'll do, Dan, the first one for you, and it's based around kind of the automation process. So considering your current focus being on automating data use in businesses, what proportion of your work with client teams focuses on upskilling teams to use these systems? And is it usually a general kind of upskill, or do you tend to focus on a unique team?
I'd say 100% of our focus, because I don't want to build a big team of consultants, because as we've all agreed, those skills are scarce, expensive, and quite volatile. So, you know, our premise, and it's great, everyone is kind of agreeing furiously just from different angles, that follow the data from left to right and upskill. Yeah, the outcomes come from that. Upskill the existing teams because they own it, it becomes their success, and then you're not fighting people internally. You're helping people succeed internally, and they have their own networks of sponsors and the ability to sort of apply force within an organization that you'll never have as an external vendor. And I completely agree with what Martin's saying, Luis. You know, this is it, right? This is the tipping point that everyone in data has been waiting for. All you need to do is look at the difference between data-driven organizations like Uber, Airbnb, etc., and then their legacy competitors. And this is existential for legacy organizations, which are organizations that started pre-internet. So, you know, it's all, you can't go and find 10 data scientists on the street, not good ones anyway. You know, you need to make more of what you've got already and then take advantage of the tools that are out there. You know, just leverage those, but you can only do that with your own people and your own data. There's no, I agree, no silver bullet. Get your data better.
Brilliant, thank you for that, Dan. The next question we got from Mark, and it's for yourself, Lewis. So you mentioned some blockers in terms of data maturity in an organization. So have you come across any effective steps in establishing a good appreciation for project data analytics?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, I think, as I mentioned in the presentation, I think the first step for an organization is to assess and understand their level of data maturity, to see which are the areas they should be focusing more. Well, of course, as I mentioned, everything needs to be handled simultaneously and everything is related. But of course, organizations need to start somewhere. So starting with a data maturity assessment, it's really important to see where to start putting the efforts. And then, of course, I have seen that the most effective way to establish a good appreciation for PDA between the different teams within the organization comes from senior leadership and the culture of the organization. We have experienced that one of the biggest barriers is something that we call a divide between geeks versus business. So divide between not common understanding of terminology between project control people, data scientists, and project deliverers. So that's why our research, and based on all of the experts, says that we need this universal data literacy. We need everyone to have an awareness of what the tech can and cannot do. But most important, we need people to understand the value of the data. So why are we gathering this data? And of course, they need to make to know that this data is being used to inform better decision making. So not for them to think it's just extra activity, that actually the organization is using the data to inform better decisions.
Brilliant, thank you for that, Lewis. Just jump straight on to the next one, which is for yourself, Martin. This one coming from Mark. So obviously you talk a lot about upskilling teams, but there's a, you know, we see it quite often in businesses when some of the business functions are outsourced to third parties. So what's the benefit in upskilling our teams when it comes to data competency, as opposed to relying on, you know, someone else, some third party, to provide me with the same end result?
So it's this key thing about being an intelligent client. So if you don't know about this stuff, you can't contract for it, you can't ask for it. So we've got people who are sort of translator roles, we call them. So it's a person who sits across project delivery and data and can sort of communicate with both. And that's really, really fundamental. And you need to have conversations with people like Dan, right? You need to have conversations with people like Microsoft as well. And you need to understand, in terms of black box solutions, is it being trained on data that's representative to your environment or not? So there's data security issues, all sorts of things. So if you don't put those training sort of things in place, you're not in a situation where you can start to contract for this effectively. You're just handing everything over. It needs to be your strategy, and it needs to be your vision, and it needs to be your roadmap. And if you're not shaping that and just relying on somebody else, you'll never do it, right? And we're seeing with organisations now where they've invited us in to go and write this stuff, and I won't go and write it. And I'm saying that if it doesn't come from them and they're not part of the journey, it'll never stick. It needs to be sort of intrinsic part of the organisation, and they need to be shaping the plan.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Martin. Just a question from Daniel. So it's for yourself, Dan. Other speakers do feel to jump in after as well. So is it the experience of the speakers that most organisations jump straight into analytics first and then upskilling the delivery teams? And also, do you have any examples of organisations only implementing systems and not upskilling their teams at all?
Well, I think I wish I wish that clients would get into analysis. My experience is that most people just, most organisations carry on doing what they're doing, which isn't very much, and just doing it all in Excel, right? Yeah, that's the key competitor to all of us who are trying to change organisations, is the kind of, well, it is what it is. We know it's not right, but this is what the previous incumbent did. And I think the existential question for any organisation really is, how do you inculcate that culture in the board of a data-driven sensibility and a culture of experimentation? And I think that's the key point, is that there's this implication that if a project doesn't happen, that it was a failure. No, that was a great project. If you ignored a project that wasn't going to ever deliver the value that you needed, then that's a win, right? Because we see the results of all of these tech-first choices, of all of these broken systems that the organisation will try and replace in 5 years' time. Where if they'd invested in better data and better upskilling their existing excellent people, not the fools, in Martin's term, but we all know who those stars are, the guys and the girls who you chuck all the data out and say, I'll sort something out in Excel with you. Give those people better tools, because they know what they're about, and they will change the dial. You're not going to change it by hiring data scientists.
And thanks for that, Dan. Then Martin or Lewis, you have any thoughts on that one?
Spot on, I think. It needs to come from inside the organisation, and it's about changing people's jobs, right? Some project management jobs are really dull, really, really dull. And I started off there at the start of my career where I was doing dull stuff that I didn't enjoy, going around and progress chasing stuff. Let's get rid of it all. Right? We don't need to do all that stuff anymore. So there's a brand new opportunity for us to start to look into the future, so we can get predictive. We can start to understand what's going to go wrong and start to intervene, do a load of scenario planning. That's a cool job, right? That's a really, really cool job. And it's going to bring a load more people in this sector. And I think they'll get paid a lot more as well, because it's going to be top-end skills. So yeah, I think we're looking at a very, very different future. And it's a really exciting one, we should grasp it. It's cool. Really, really cool stuff.
Brilliant, thanks for that. I am conscious of time. We've got one final question. I know there's some attendees who've not been able to answer your questions. What we do, if it's a pressing question, do get in touch with the APM team via the event website, which will be online, and they'll put you in touch with the speakers if you do have a question and you want to direct to one of them. But just kind of a closing question to all three of you. It's what's the first thing that people watching today should do as they're going to leave this webinar? If you can only pick one thing. So I don't know, Lewis, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, for sure. If I would need to just pick one thing, I would say that despite their job role is just to get involved in this project data analytics area. So in order to do this, please just contact us if you are interested in one of our reports. As well, please join one of the project data analytics communities. So for instance, the APM has the data advisory group, which you can join. As well, if you are interested, if you are part of an organization that wants to sponsor research or want to collaborate with us, my next stage of PhD will look into case studies. So if you want to collaborate, please also get in touch with us.
Thanks for that. And Dan, the same question to you. The first thing people should do?
Get on with it. Stop talking about it. I think there's, you see on lots of boardrooms, data is the new oil. It's our second greatest asset after our people. In which case, you better start investing in it, I think, and provide more support to your most skilled people who right now are probably doing it in Excel. Help them automate the boring parts of their job, like Martin said, such that they can start getting on with the interesting bits. We hear a lot of people saying we're definitely going to start probably next year.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dan. And Martin?
Invest in yourself, right? This is coming. It's coming down the track. It's going to be transformational, and a lot of jobs are going to get blown apart. So if you've got a mortgage relying on it and things like that, right, you're going to be exposed. So I think just invest in yourself, right? Get immersed in this stuff. There's Project Data Analytics community. We run loads of events. We've got the hackathons, right? There's reports out through Lewis and various other stuff. The APM's got various reports, etc. We've got more stuff coming out of the task force for the next few months. So we've got business cases. We've got getting started in Project Data Analytics guides. We've got all sorts of stuff coming up, and it's all planned, and we're going to start to phase it out soon. So just immerse yourself in it. And if you really want to go for it, and you want a sort of inflection point in your career, then get involved in the academy as well. We're trying to upskill you, get you ready for this future.
Brilliant. Thanks, Martin. Just before we kind of close out the session, I'm not a big fan of overrunning. So there's a few questions on the screen for you, and this is purely for attendees, just to get a feel for what type of events you prefer. So if you just get out your phones and join on the Slido poll, we'd really appreciate some feedback. You should be able to see those on your Slido screen. Just whilst you do that, it's just a thanks to Martin, Dan, and Lewis for giving up your time and to give us your perspective on this. It's been really useful and really informative. And as I mentioned previously, if you do have any questions that you'd like to post to any of them, either get in touch with the APM team via the event website, and we'll make sure we get your details across to them. But yeah, I think a final thank you for all of you. And the Slido poll will still be there, so please do continue filling that in. And I hope everyone has a good rest of the afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.